young lady by the name of Anneliese Michel was subjected to a horrific exorcism that ultimately resulted in a tragic event in 1973. The occurrences that occurred during her exorcisms continue to terrify both witnesses and specialists. During the years preceding up to her exorcism, Anneliese Michel had been experiencing a number of bizarre occurrences, including those in which she would see visions and hear voices. In the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose, the events that transpired during her experience served as the inspiration for the storyline. It is stated that Anneliese Michel was one of the most possessed persons in the history of the world, and her narrative in particular is quite unsettling. In this section, we will examine the sequence of events that led up to her exorcism, as well as the gruesome specifics of the procedure itself. Anneliese Michel was born in the year 1952 in the town of Klingenberg, which is located in the state of Bavaria in West Germany. Her family was a committed member of the parish. In addition, 3 of her aunts were already nuns, and her father had aspirations of becoming a priest. In a regrettable turn of events, Michel's mother was under the impression that her family was already struggling under a cloud of shame for which the whole family needed to make amends. An austere lifestyle was something that Anneliese and her 3 sisters had to suffer. The girls were not permitted to interact with other youngsters and were required to spend the majority of their time praying within the house. Regrettably, Anneliese had a number of bouts of illness during her childhood. Measles, mumps, and scarlet fever were among diseases that she had to fight off at an early age. Not only was the little child underweight, but she also often struggled with a variety of medical conditions. In an interview with The Telegraph in 2005, Anneliese's mother said that the fact that she had a kid outside of marriage in 1948 caused a tremendous deal of humiliation to her family reputation. During that historical period, they obliged her to wear black on the day of her wedding as a symbol of her transgression. After that, her mother made a concerted effort to make up for past transgressions and practiced a high level of chastity. Because of this, Anneliese was under a lot of pressure to frequently make amends for the transgressions of other people, and she was also required to sleep on the ground as a kind of penance for the drug addicts who slept on the ground themselves. Her family also participated in the things that the family did, in addition to attending Mass twice a week. When Anneliese was 16 years old, she was diagnosed with both physical and psychological illnesses. She had been struggling with the difficult existence, but she kept her suffering to herself. The year 1968 marked the beginning of a significant change in Anneliese's life. She began experiencing unexplainable blackouts when she was 16 years old. It is said that Michel would enter a trance-like condition during the first blackouts and then wander about aimlessly. This is according to historical reports. The unfortunate thing was that she would pee the bed while she was in these trances. Unsettling trances were noted by her friends and relatives as being experienced by her. There was a beginning of Anneliese's issues, which was unfortunate. Even after a year had passed, she had the same episode and soiled the bed once again. Following that, it seemed that Anneliese would have further challenges in the future. It has been reported by several sources that the appointment to the doctor that her family made for her was a complete waste of time, since the physician was unable to identify any issues with her. When Anneliese was diagnosed with TB in 1970, she was admitted to the hospital. During her time of recuperation, Anneliese said that she was experiencing exhilaration and that she was able to hear strange voices and noises. In an effort to figure out what was wrong with her, the family made the decision to take her to a neurologist. It wasn't long after her appointment with the physician that she was given a diagnosis of epilepsy in the temporal lobe. There is a possibility that she may encounter visual and auditory hallucinations, as well as experiencing seizures and memory loss. Throughout edition, she was struggling with anxiety and despair as a result of the horrible experiences she had endured throughout her life. As a consequence of this, she began to see things that were not there, and listening to voices that no one else could hear about. When Anneliese was finally given an accurate diagnosis, one would have thought that her life would begin to improve. But unfortunately, this was not the case. It was particularly concerning that her epilepsy was likely the cause of Geschwind syndrome, a condition that is characterized by hyperreligiosity, since her mental state continued to deteriorate. Although she was administered Zentropil to assist in the management of her seizures, the medication did not prevent her from having seizures. Anneliese continued her education after enrolling at the University of Würzburg in 1973 and completing her prerequisites. Despite this, she deepened her sadness and came to the conclusion that she was damned. Despite her belief that she was possessed by demons, her position continued to deteriorate. In addition to complaining of a sore throat and having her tonsils removed, she would have daytime hallucinations in which she would see devil faces wherever she looked. Soon after that, Anneliese developed a strong aversion to symbolic representations of religion. She stopped going to Mass, and she refused to consume holy water or dine in front of a crucifix. While Anneliese's parents tried all in their power to assist their daughter, Anneliese's conduct continued to become more strange. She is said to have stripped nude, eaten insects, and licked her pee off the floor, according to the reports. The alarming conduct that Anneliese engaged in was described by her mother as being one in which she would execute hundreds of squats every day until she would eventually tear the ligaments in her knees. When she reached this stage, she hid herself under the table and yelled like a dog for a period of 2 days. The members of her family want to seek more medical assistance. However, Anneliese pleaded for religious intervention, despite the fact that she had been refused an exorcism on 2 separate occasions. Her parents brought her to Ernest Alt, who believed in her possession and said that she did not look like an epileptic. Her parents then petitioned the local bishop, Josef Stangl, for assistance. This was the final option that her parents went her to. A priest named Father Arnold Renz, who had previous expertise performing exorcisms, and Ernest Alt were the ones who carried out the ritual. A decision to execute an exorcism on Anneliese Michel was met with reluctance by the Catholic Church. After considerable persuasion, and only after getting persuasive proof of her ownership, they finally gave in and decided to do what's being asked of them. On September 24, 1975, Father Renz successfully carried out the first rite in a series of ceremonies. After the first exorcism, it was discovered that Anneliese's body was inhabited by at least 6 demons. Inside of her body, there were 6 demons who were only known by their names: Lucifer, Cain, Judas Iscariot, Adolf Hitler, Nero, and Fleischmann, who was a disgraced priest. All of these demons competed for power. In the course of these recorded sessions, they held her in restraint for a considerable amount of time while the priests carried out the rituals, but to no result. The gradual but steady decline in Anneliese's physical appearance was accompanied by her cessation of eating. Upon the 67th exorcism, Anneliese had become completely unrecognizable. She was covered with bruises and bed sores, and she had lost 68 pounds over her life. Additionally, Anneliese was suffering from malnutrition and dehydration, and she had begun to experience hair loss. Despite this, the exorcisms continued until she passed away in July of 1976 due to starvation and failure to drink enough water. According to the priests and Anneliese's family, She was considered a martyr since they believed that she had made a self-sacrifice to atone for the transgressions of her youth. It is unfortunate that the state of Bavaria did not view it that way, and instead prosecuted all 4 persons with negligent murder. Every single defendant entered a plea of not guilty. In spite of the fact that Anneliese testified that she was in possession of the exorcisms during the recordings, all 4 persons were found guilty and sentenced to a total of 3 months of probation in addition to 6 months of prison time, which they all spent. There were no indications of epileptic damage in her brain, even on a microscopic level, according to the autopsies that were performed. The life of Anneliese Michel was marked by a number of unfortunate events, mental illness, and intense religious zeal. Regrettably, her death was the conclusion of her narrative. Furthermore, her memory continues to serve as a constant reminder of the extent that people are willing to go to in order to get rid of something that they consider to be bad. We are compelled to accept that there are still things in this world that we are unable to explain, because her narrative blurs the borders between science and the supernatural.